Okay, so the first part of the oral history began with a discussion of the three waves, the wave one, two, three, which I think is an academic way of describing something, and particularly I think belongs to Richard Daynard and his crowd of followers in the litigation, the high power litigation groups that have studied his work and not his necessarily his work, but his organization. And they had absolutely nothing other than a few pieces here and there. I think he had. I really think there was a very nice piece from somebody who had been PR, which gave a history which was useful to me in putting together a book that I wrote back in 1992, which was purloined by the document fairies out in California. I don't know how it got there, but I think maybe it went from Brown and Williamson to University of California, San Francisco. Thank you, Stanton, Glass, and so forth. Don't mind, but you know, the issue of the three periods, the thing that was missing was the documents, and the documents were actually criminally hidden, and there was no question in my mind when I was there, and I knew what they were doing from the moment I came in, and I heard the word special account four, and they got really excited. I mean, I got excited, but they were tense on that one, and I was in a very delightful atmosphere. I mean, sometimes I think that you think you're really doing something unusual, and to me it was a challenge, but at the same time it was stupid, absolutely stupid. I knew that I was going to be off, and maybe that's part of being. I'm not going to call it a whistleblower because I don't share that company. For some reason or other, I've had conversations or written conversations with one of the most famous whistleblowers, and that would be Daniel Ellsberg. And yet I don't seem to meet this criteria. There were other people, and if you look me up on Wikipedia, you won't find me as a whistleblower.
So are you a whistleblower?
No, I don't think I'm a whistleblower. What I think, I never thought about whistleblowing. I never thought about whistleblowing as what I was doing. I mean, it may have been to me, what I felt at the time because I was going through a divorce, and I really missed my children in the very beginning, and I had really had a rough time, maybe the year before, more than any other time in my life. Maybe I just had a death wish. I don't know, and perhaps that's part of being in this kind of frame of mind. I don't know. That's sort of dramatic now, but I do believe that every day I came in, from the very first day that I heard Special Account 4, that this was a terminal issue. As a matter of fact, I didn't feel that comfortable sometimes, and so I didn't really have a directive. No, I don't think I was a whistleblower. I don't think I'm a whistleblower now. At least a lot of people don't put me in that category, and yet um, it doesn't really matter. I think that from what I've heard of the young man who is presently facing probably a lifetime in prison, and Andre Assange, a Swedish guy who gathers information. Those people are whistleblowers. Daniel Ellsberg is certainly the best known person in whistleblowing, but that's not the point. The point is that there's a condition and a frame of mind, and that leads you on to do something. Maybe it's just out of sheer boredom. I don't know. But anyway, this stuff that was happening in the room was caused by the lawyers, and they created the whole situation back from the 50s.
Tell me about the room.
The room.
Yes.
Well, the room was enormous in the first place. It was in the Brown and Williamson Tower, which is fantastically large, and they had dedicated a full floor, almost a full floor. That was a computer and a couple of sales offices there on the same floor, but it was separate and apart from Brown and Williamson, and you weren't supposed to fraternize and with the employees at Brown and Williamson, which was the I.W. Hughes Center. It wasn't the gigantic building downstairs from which everything comes, but it was certainly a very it was like a second office for the important people who ran Brown and Williamson and its various subsidiary companies. Yeah. So
what did you do there?
What did I do? I was originally hired on January 6th of 1988 as a document analyst. I had about 2 years of what we call peripheral law. Some of it was in 600 level courses, and of course I had a PhD, so there was not a consideration other than I remember when I was hired, you're too qualified, we're not interested. And yet I felt like I was in a room full of people who were either on the very high end of the intellectual world, or they were about to be, or some young people, and some of them were just plain paralegals. And that floor was very interesting in that it was never supervised. Very seldom was there anybody there. The lawyers seem to have come to the conclusion that as long as they didn't have to look at the information, at the documents that we were looking at, and this was for the purpose of computerizing, and they were going to computerize these documents. But I think that the theory was that this had already been done by every other tobacco company.
So how many documents existed prior to January 6, 1988?
How many documents existed where? Are you talking about in the litigation?
Yes.
Oh, well, in litigation, as I say in the first tape, there was almost nothing whatsoever that was relevant or meaningful, and that was purposeful, because it was not that they were going to distribute any kind of document that was detrimental. It was just a part of the strategy. The whole strategy was the public relations, which had to do with Tobacco Institute, and formerly another name was TRC, but the rest of it was the procurement of the Council for Tobacco Research, and this came after the 1960s, and so you had that as a sort of a subterfuge. And if you had people looking at these documents who were not bound by ethics, not bound by the principles or the canons of ethics, then you could pass them through. For example, the concept of privilege. There was, everything was marked privilege, no matter what. It would be NB or NA. It didn't really matter whether there was anything a page before might be privileged. This is how they got away with it. And as I say, all the companies had done this before, so there was a pattern. It had already been masterfully done by the kings of concealment, which I don't think I'll borrow from someone else. I don't think it's entirely out of order to say that. The real kings of concealment were the lawyers. The lawyers had every reason whatsoever to do their jobs, and their jobs were to conceal from discovery everything that was important, and to make sure that if there was a plaintiff out there, and believe me, they came and went, and the first wave there was a lot, so to speak, and they didn't get anywhere. And I remember some fairly high power lawyers were involved in trying to discover some material. But as I say, they blue foldered in Brown and Williamson. You could be sure that if you found a document and the document was discovered, it was never going to be produced. It was just it wasn't that they're going to trash the document. They didn't do that, because we later find out in two ways, and both of them had something to do with what I did. I discovered the documents, which were first released, at least the ones that went through the litigation in Louisville, Kentucky, and eventually ended up on the Gulf Coast. And the second group was produced out of the same set of documents through Waxman, Honorable Henry Waxman, who had been forever, he was sort of like in many ways, he had his heart in the right place, but he just didn't have the brain matter to figure out what was going on. And a lot of people would tell him things in hearings. I mean, he'd hold hearings, and they would tell him things, and it's just, if you just ask the question another way, you might have gotten an answer, but I doubt it. Because in 1965, for example, 1966, when they held the hearings it took them 2 years, and from the hearings in 65 and 66, it took them 2 years to discover that everyone, not just a few, but every one of the people who appeared or submitted a report to the committee which wanted to control tobacco, and did eventually. Every one of them had been at one time or another, and certainly when they were there before the Senate, they were bought by tobacco, and they were bought by the lawyers at Shook Hardy Bacon. Now, whatever happened to this whole concept of being honest and truthful as a lawyer didn't really matter. And certainly in the room, if you had somebody who was a paralegal or an assistant or going to med school or preparing for the going to go out and do something else other than there were very intelligent people there working on these projects, and then I know that the other groups in Vincent and Elkins and certainly at King and Spalding, they were biologists, and Vincent and Elkins.
This is part of an ongoing oral history of the so-called victory. Is it a victory?
You mean, what do you mean, the victory? The victory of you're leading to what I don't consider to be a victory at all, and I think it's a total disaster. As a matter of fact, the Master Settlement Agreement, which, by the way, if you really wanted to know, I would agree. There's a very famous character out in California by the name of Stanton Glantz, who always says, if the tobacco industry wants it, then there's something wrong with it. And he's perfectly right here. There's no question about it. Tobacco industry had for years, and I read it, they wanted a settlement like this, and they got it. And so it wasn't a victory. No. It depends.
Why not?
Well, because the lawyers got the money and a couple of other groups got the money, but that was it. It was over, and it had nothing whatsoever to do